The wedding day whispers that unraveled everything. The scent of gardenias hung thick in the bridal suite, a cloying sweetness that made my throat tighten. Through the partially open door to the groom's preparation room, I heard the words that would change my daughter's life forever and set me on a path I never imagined walking. Honestly, the thought of touching that heifer makes me want to gag. My future son-in-law chuckled to his friends, the ice cubes in his glass clinking like tiny bells of betrayal. But her family's estate? Now that's worth faking a few smiles for, in that moment, standing frozen in the opulent hotel hallway with my custom-tailored suit suddenly, feeling like a costume. I made a silent vow I would dismantle this man's life piece by piece, and I would do it with a smile on my face that matched the one he wore when lying to my daughter. The irony wasn't lost on me that the Plaza Hotel, with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors, had been the site of my own wedding 35 years earlier. Eleanor had worn her mother's lace veil, and I'd whispered promises I'd kept until cancer stole her from us 5 years prior. Now our daughter, Chloe, stood before a three-way mirror while a team of stylists fussed over her like hummingbirds around a rare flower. At 26, she had her mother's emerald eyes and my stubborn china, combination that made my heart swell even as it now threatened to break. "Dad, you're crying." Chloe's reflection smiled at me from the mirror, mistaking my devastation for sentimentality. "Just remembering your mother on your wedding day," I managed, the half-truth tasting bitter. I crossed the room, my polished Oxford sinking into plush carpet, and placed my hands on her shoulders. The French lace of her gown felt delicate as a spiderweb beneath my fingers. "You look absolutely breathtaking, sweetheart." The stylist, a sharp-faced woman named Giselle, who spoke with a European accent I couldn't place, stepped back to admire her work. "The hair must be perfect for the photographs, no?" "The light at 4 o'clock will be divine in the garden." She adjusted a single curl that had dared to escape from the intricate updo. "Now, we must not smudge the makeup." Chloe reached up to squeeze my hand, her engagement ring a 3-carat oval diamond set in platinum catching the light. Marcus had presented it to her on a hot air balloon ride over Napa Valley, a story she'd told so many times I could recite it from memory. At the time, I'd been impressed by the gesture's extravagance. Now I recognized it as the first move in an elaborate con. "The guests are beginning to arrive," I said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "I should go welcome them." "Don't let Aunt Margaret corner you," Chloe warned, her eyes sparkling with the nervous excitement of a bride. "She wants to show you pictures of her new Persian cats." I kissed her forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender shampoo, mingled with expensive hairspray. "I'll use the emergency exit if I have to." The hallway outside was a river of people, flowing toward the grand ballroom, where the ceremony would take place. Waiters in crisp white jackets circulated with trays of champagne, the bubbles catching light from the crystal sconces. I accepted a glass but didn't drink, my stomach churning too violently for even a sip. That's when I saw Marcus emerging from his suite, surrounded by 4 of his groomsmen. They were all cut from the same cloth, smooth, handsome, with the confident posture of men who'd never been told no. Marcus Clayton, with his Harvard Law degree and family connections that traced back to Mayflower passengers, looked every inch the aristocratic groom. His charcoal suit had been tailored within a millimeter of perfection, his dark hair artfully tousled as if he'd just stepped off a yacht. "Robert." He spotted me and broke into a wide, practiced smile. "The man of the hour?" "Well, second to me, of course," his friends chuckled on cue. "How's my beautiful bride holding up?" "She's radiant," I said, and it wasn't a lie. "Nervous, but radiant. Tell her I'm counting the minutes." He clapped me on the shoulder, his grip firmer than necessary. "After today, we'll be family." Can you believe it? What I couldn't believe was that 20 minutes earlier, this same man had referred to my daughter as that heifer and joked about how long he'd have to wait before he could cash in on her inheritance. The words had sliced through me with surgical precision, leaving wounds that bled rage instead of blood. "I need some air," I muttered, setting my untouched champagne on a passing tray. "Of course." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, the smile never leaving his face. "Big day for fathers, too." Don't worry, I'll take good care of her. And the estate. There it was, the barely veiled reference to what really interested him. My family's estate, Willowbrook, wasn't just a property. It was 200 acres of prime Connecticut real estate, a Georgian mansion filled with art and antiques, and a wine vineyard that had been featured in the Times. Eleanor's grandfather had purchased it in 1932 for a song, and its current value would make most people's eyes water. I nodded stiffly and made my escape, down a side corridor that led to a secluded terrace, overlooking Central Park. The late September air carried the first hint of autumn, a crispness that felt cleansing after the stifling perfume of the hotel. Leaning against the stone balustrade, I closed my eyes and tried to steady my breathing. The decision crystallized in that moment, cold and hard as diamond. I wouldn't make a scene. I wouldn't storm into the bridal suite and shatter Chloe's illusions. Not because I wanted to spare Marcus, but because sudden revelations rarely stick. Chloe would think I was overprotective, jealous, unable to let go. She'd marry him anyway, and I'd be relegated to the role of the difficult father-in-law. No, this required precision. This required evidence. This required me to become the spider, not the fly. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to my lawyer, Charles Winthrop, a man who had handled my family's affairs for 3 decades. Emergency meeting tomorrow morning, urgent, bring everything on the prenup. His reply came instantly. Understood. My office, 8 a.m., everything okay? No, I typed back. But it will be. The string quartet began playing Pachelbel's Canon, the signal for guests to take their seats. I straightened my tie, squared my shoulders, and walked back inside to play my part. The ceremony passed in a surreal haze. Chloe floated down the aisle on my arm, her fingers trembling against my sleeve. Marcus waited at the altar with that infuriatingly perfect smile. When I placed her hand in his, I looked directly into his eyes and saw the calculation there, the smug satisfaction of a predator who had successfully stalked its prey. I'm trusting you with my greatest treasure, I said, the words tasting like ash. You have my word, he replied, and I had to fight the urge to drive my fist into his smug face. The reception that followed was a masterpiece of excess. 500 guests, a 12-tier cake, a band that had played at the White House. Marcus and Chloe moved through, the crowd like royalty, accepting congratulations and toasts. I watched from the periphery, nursing a scotch and cataloging every interaction. That's when I noticed something peculiar. Marcus's mother, Patricia Clayton, held herself with a frosty dignity that seemed at odds with the occasion. When she thought no one was looking, her smile would slip, revealing an expression of profound disapproval. She barely spoke to Chloe, offering only a stiff embrace and a murmured congratulations. Her eyes, the same cool gray as her son's, kept drifting to the exits as if counting down until she could leave. During the father-daughter dance, I held Chloe close as we swayed to What a Wonderful World. He makes me so happy, Dad, she whispered into my shoulder. I just want your happiness, sweetheart, I replied. And it was the truest thing I'd said all day. Always remember that you have options. No matter what happens, Willowbrook will always be your home. She pulled back slightly, her brow furrowed. What do you mean, no matter what happens? Nothing's going to happen. Life is unpredictable, I said lightly, spinning her under my arm. That's all I mean. The reception wound down around midnight. Chloe changed into a going-away outfit, a cream-colored suit that Eleanor would have loved, and she and Marcus ran through a tunnel of sparklers to a waiting Rolls-Royce. They would spend the night at the plaza before flying to Santorini in the morning. As the car pulled away, Chloe waving from the back window, the mask I'd worn all day finally cracked. My best friend Martin appeared at my side with 2 glasses of brandy. Rough day, old friend? He asked quietly. You have no idea, I said, accepting the glass and downing it in one burning gulp. Charles. Winthrop's office occupied the top floor of a pre-war building on Park Avenue. The waiting room smelled of lemon polish and old money, with leather chairs that had molded themselves to generations of wealthy clients. Charles himself was waiting when I arrived, his white hair perfectly combed, his suit immaculate despite the early hour. Robert, he said without preamble. What's happened? For the next hour, I laid it out, the overheard conversation, the casual cruelty, the references to Chloe's inheritance. Charles listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. This is problematic, he said finally. The prenuptial agreement is solid. It protects her separate property, including her interest in Willowbrook. But if he's already talking about cashing in, he may have plans to challenge it eventually. Or worse, to manipulate her into making changes voluntarily. Can we void the marriage? I asked, the desperation leaking into my voice. Not without evidence of fraud, and what you overheard, while disturbing, isn't sufficient. We need documentation. We need proof of his intentions? Then we'll get proof, I said, my voice steady now with purpose. Charles leaned forward, his elbows on the polished mahogany desk. There are professionals who handle these matters. Discreet investigators. But this could get messy, Robert. And expensive. I don't care about the cost. I care about my daughter. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. I know someone. His name is Julian Thorne. Former FBI, now private. He's the best, and he's discreet. Set up a meeting, I said, rising from my chair. As soon as possible. Julian Thorne didn't look like a former FBI agent. With his rumpled khakis, faded polo shirt, and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, he resembled a college professor more than an investigator. We met in the back room of a quiet bookstore in Greenwich Village, surrounded by the scent of old paper and dust. Charles tells me you have a situation, he said after we'd shaken hands. His voice was soft, almost gentle. I repeated the story, adding details I hadn't realized. I remembered the way Marcus's friends had laughed, the specific cadence of his voice when he'd said heifer, the clink of ice in their glasses. Julian listened, occasionally making notes in a small black notebook. When I finished, he tapped his pen against the paper for a moment before speaking. Emotional cruelty isn't a crime, he said. But financial manipulation, fraud, intent to defraud, those are different matters. You say he mentioned her inheritance specifically? Twice, once in the conversation I overheard, and again to me right before the ceremony. That's our starting point, Julian said. We need to establish a pattern. We'll need surveillance, financial forensics, possibly electronic monitoring with proper legal precautions. This will take time, Robert. Possibly months? I have time, I said. What I don't have is patience for watching my daughter be used. He gave me a long, assessing look. There's something else you should know. These situations, they often involve more than one player. If he's this calculating about the marriage, he may have help. Family members, business associates, even friends of your daughter who might be incentivized to facilitate things. The thought chilled me. How do we find out? Carefully, he said. Very, very carefully. The next 3 months passed with glacial slowness. Chloe and Marcus returned from their honeymoon, tanned and glowing, settling into the Greenwich condo Marcus had purchased shortly before the wedding. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple attending charity galas, appearing in society pages, hosting dinner parties where Marcus held court with stories of his latest real estate deals. Meanwhile, Julian Thorne worked in the shadows. His first report arrived in a secure email folder, password protected and encrypted. Subject: Preliminary findings, Marcus Clayton, subject graduated Harvard Law but never took the bar exam. Currently lists himself as venture capitalist, but investigation reveals no registered fund, no office, no staff. Primary income appears to be from family trust, Clayton Holdings, estimated $5 million. And sporadic real estate transactions of questionable profitability. 4 lawsuits pending from former business, partners alleging fraud misrepresentation. All settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. Credit report shows $850,000 in personal debt across multiple cards and lines of credit. Recent payoff of $300,000 coincides with wedding date. Mother, Patricia Clayton, has history of mental health issues, institutionalized briefly 2012. Father deceased, apparent suicide 2015. Family fortune largely depleted by father's failed investments. Social media analysis shows pattern of targeting wealthy women. Previous relationships with heiress to pharmaceutical fortune 2018-2019 and daughter of tech billionaire 2020 to 2021 both ended abruptly when families intervened. Preliminary surveillance indicates subject maintaining separate residence, studio apartment, Upper East Side. Visited weekly by unidentified female. Investigation ongoing. I read the report 3 times, each pass deepening my anger. This wasn't just a bad husband. This was a professional predator. Julian had included photographs Marcus entering the studio apartment, Marcus having lunch with a striking brunette at expensive restaurant, Marcus meeting with a man Julian had identified as a known con artist specializing in inheritance scams. The most damning evidence came in the 4th month. Julian had managed to place a recording device in Marcus's car legally. Questionable, but he assured me it had been obtained through a cooperating third party who had access. The audio files arrived on a USB drive delivered by courier. I listened to them in my study at Willowbrook. The doors locked, a glass of whiskey untouched at my elbow. The first file was a conversation between Marcus and his mother. Patricia, you need to move faster. The prenup is ironclad. Marcus, I'm working on it, mother. She's more attached to her father than I anticipated. Patricia, then make her less attached. Start suggesting he's controlling, that he's trying to keep her dependent. Women believe that nonsense. Marcus, I've already planted the seeds. She's beginning to question why he's so involved in the estate management. Patricia, good, once she's fully alienated. She signed whatever you put in front of her. How long until you can approach her about adding your name to the Willowbrook deed? Marcus, another 6 months, maybe less. I'm working on a story about tax advantages, estate planning. She eat it up. Patricia, just remember why you're doing this. Our family's honor depends on it. Your father's failures won't define us. The second file was worse. A conversation with the brunette from the photographs. Woman, I'm getting tired of waiting, Marcus. You said we'd be together by now? Marcus, be patient, Isabel. The old man is suspicious. I need to be careful. Isabel, careful? You're married to her. How much more careful do you need to be? Marcus, I need the money, darling. Once Willowbrook is mine ours, we can disappear. Start fresh somewhere. But I need you to keep playing your part. Isabel, and what part is that? Your mistress? Your secret? Marcus, my everything. Just a little longer. I stopped the recording, my hands shaking so badly I could barely remove the headphones. Not just a gold digger, a bigamist in spirit if not in law. A man with a mistress waiting in the wings, a mother coaching him on psychological manipulation, and my daughter caught in the middle like a butterfly pinned to a board. That evening I drove to their Greenwich condo unannounced. Chloe answered the door in yoga pants and a Harvard Law sweatshirt that belonged to Marcus. Dad, what a surprise! She hugged me, and I held on a moment longer than usual. Just in the neighborhood, I lied. Thought I'd check on my favorite daughter. I'm your only daughter, she laughed, pulling me inside. The condo was sleek and modern, all white surfaces and sharp angles, nothing like the cozy, book-filled rooms of Willowbrook. Marcus appeared from the home office, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Robert, to what do we owe the pleasure? I was hoping to steal Chloe for dinner, I said, matching his false cheer. There's a new French place that just opened. My treat. Actually, we have plans tonight, Marcus said smoothly, slipping an arm around Chloe's waist. The Halstead Gala. Black tie. You know how these things are? I could reschedule, Chloe said, looking between us. I haven't seen Dad in weeks. Don't be silly, Marcus said, his grip tightening almost imperceptibly. We've already committed. And you know how important these connections are for my business. Something in his tone, the subtle condescension, the implication that her family was less important than his connections, made my blood simmer. But I kept my smile in place. Of course. Another time, as I turned to leave, my eyes caught on a document lying open on the kitchen island. It was a draft of a property transfer form, with Willowbrook's address clearly visible in the property description field. Chloe followed my gaze and quickly moved to close the folder. "What's that?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Just some estate planning Marcus is helping me with," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Tax advantages. I see." I looked at Marcus, who had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "You know, Chloe, your mother and I spent 30 years with Winthrop and Associates handling our estate. They're quite good. Perhaps you should have Charles look over anything before you sign it." "Marcus is a lawyer, Dad," she said, a defensive edge in her voice. "I think he knows what he's doing." "Of course he does," I said. "I'm sure he does." The drive back to Willowbrook was a blur of rage and fear. He was moving faster than I'd anticipated, planting seeds of alienation, preparing legal documents, and Chloe, my smart, strong daughter, was falling for it. The following week, Julian delivered his most significant breakthrough. He had gained access to Marcus's email through a phishing scheme that sounded like something from a spy novel. What he found was a treasure trove of evidence. There were emails between Marcus and a man named Arthur Finch, who presented himself as a financial planner but was actually a convicted felon specializing in elder fraud. They discussed softening up Chloe, isolating her from protective influences, and creating scenarios of financial urgency that would make her more amenable to transferring assets. There were receipts for gifts purchased for Isabel, the mistress, with funds drawn from a joint account Marcus shared with Chloe. Most damningly, there was a timeline Marcus had created for himself, outlining his plans month by month. MON 3, establish marital harmony, build trust. MON 4-6, begin gentle criticism of father's management of estate, suggest inefficiency, outdated methods. MON 7-9, propose streamlining estate matters, offer to help with paperwork. 10-12, execute transfer of partial ownership, create joint tenancy. MONT 13-18, use marital leverage to gain controlling interest. Month 19-24, liquidate non-essential assets. Begin divorce proceedings with favorable settlement. At the bottom, he'd written, goal, minimum $15 million net within 24 months. I stared at the document, printed out on Julian's high-resolution printer, until the words blurred. 24 months. He'd given himself 2 years to steal my daughter's inheritance and destroy her life. "We have enough," Julian said quietly. We were in his downtown office, the windows offering a panoramic view of the city Marcus coveted so much. With this, plus the audio recordings, plus the testimony of his former associates, who I've located and who are willing to talk, we can destroy him. "It's not enough," I said, my voice hollow. "If I show this to Chloe now, she'd be devastated. She'd blame herself. She'd carry this betrayal for the rest of her life." "What's the alternative?" Julian asked. "Let him continue?" "No," I said, a plan forming in my mind, cold and precise. "We use his timeline against him. We know what he's going to do before he does it. We let him think he's succeeding. And then, at the moment he believes he's won, we take everything from him." Julian studied me, a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. "That's dangerous. If anything goes wrong?" "It won't," I said, "because we're going to be 3 steps ahead of him the entire time." The next phase required acting skills I didn't know I possessed. I began playing the part of the doting, slightly clueless father-in-law. I invited Marcus and Chloe to Willowbrook for weekends, praising Marcus's business acumen, asking his opinion on investments, even, and this nearly choked, me thanking him for taking such good care of my little girl. I watched as Chloe, ever eager to please her new husband, began parroting his criticisms. "Dad, don't you think the South Vineyard could be more productive with modern techniques? Or Marcus says our property taxes are astronomical compared to similar estates. Maybe we should consider subdividing." Each comment was a small knife twist, but I smiled and nodded. "That's an interesting perspective. Maybe you and Marcus could put together a proposal." I was planting my own seeds, you see, encouraging his confidence. feeding his arrogance, letting him believe he was the smartest person in every room. Meanwhile, through Julian, I was quietly dismantling his life from the shadows. We located Arthur Finch, the fraudulent financial planner, and through a series of legal threats and financial incentives, convinced him to become a cooperating witness. We tracked down Isabel, the mistress, and discovered she had a husband in the military who knew nothing about her affair. We found former business partners who once promised immunity from prosecution for their own minor roles in Marcus's schemes were eager to talk. Most importantly, we began the process of legally insulating Willowbrook in ways Marcus couldn't touch. Through a series of complex trusts, LLCs, and offshore holdings, all perfectly legal, all meticulously documented by Charles, we made the estate virtually lawsuit-proof. Even if Chloe signed every document Marcus put in front of her, she'd be signing away something she no longer technically owned. It was during this period that I discovered Marcus's true motivation. Julian dug deeper into the Clayton family history and uncovered a tragedy that explained everything. Marcus's father, Charles Clayton III, had been a respected investment banker until 2008, when his firm collapsed amid accusations of fraud. He hadn't just lost his job. He'd lost the family fortune, the respect of his peers, and ultimately his will to live. The apparent suicide was, in fact, a definite suicide. He'd jumped from the balcony of their Fifth Avenue penthouse, leaving behind mountains of debt and a shattered family. Patricia Clayton had been hospitalized not for mental health issues, but for a complete psychotic break following her husband's death. The family had been living off dwindling trust funds and borrowed money ever since. Marcus hadn't just wanted wealth. He needed it to restore what he saw as his stolen birthright. My daughter wasn't just a mark. She was his redemption. Knowing this didn't make me more sympathetic. It made me more determined. He saw his actions as justified, as reclaiming what was rightfully his. That kind of entitlement was more dangerous than simple greed. The climax approached in month 11 of Marcus's timeline. Right on schedule, he presented Chloe with a stack of documents, the estate optimization plan he'd been developing. Chloe brought them to Willowbrook one Saturday afternoon, her expression a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Marcus has been working on this for months," she said, spreading the papers across my library desk. "He says we could increase the estate's value by 40% with some strategic changes." I pretended to study them, recognizing the language from Arthur Finch's templates. The proposal called for Chloe to transfer 49% ownership of Willowbrook to a newly formed partnership that Marcus would control. It used phrases like leveraging equity and tax-efficient restructuring, but boiled down to one thing: giving Marcus nearly half of everything. "It's ambitious," I said carefully. "He's so smart, Dad," Chloe gushed, and my heart broke a little. "He's already helped 2 of his friends save millions on their estates." "I'm sure he has," I pointed to a clause on page 17. "This part about immediate liquidity options, what does that mean?" "Oh, that's just in case we need cash for investments. Marcus says there's a development opportunity in Miami that could triple our money in 18 months. Of course there was. And he needs access to Willowbrook's value to fund it." "Just as collateral," she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Chloe," I said gently, putting down the papers, "before you sign anything this significant, I'd feel better if Charles looked it over." "Just as a formality?" Her expression closed off. "Marcus said you'd say that?" "He said you don't trust him, that you're trying to control me through the estate." The words were so perfectly parroted, so exactly what Marcus had written in his emails about alienation strategies, that for a moment I couldn't speak. "Is that what you think?" I asked finally. "I think," she took a deep breath, "I think you've never really given him a chance. You judged him from the beginning because he wasn't from our world. But he's worked for everything he has. Dad, he didn't inherit it. The injustice of it, Marcus Clayton, who'd grown up in a penthouse and attended Exeter and Harvard, pretending to be a self-made man, nearly made me laugh. But I kept my expression neutral. "I just want to protect you, sweetheart. That's all I've ever wanted." I don't need protection from my husband, she said, gathering the papers. I need you to trust my judgment. After she left, I sat in the library until dark, watching the shadows lengthen across the lawn where she'd learned to ride a bicycle, where Eleanor had planted her rose garden, where our family had celebrated holidays for 3 generations. This place wasn't just property. It was our history. And Marcus saw it as a line item on a balance sheet. It was time. The trap was sprung with elegant simplicity. Julian had discovered that Marcus, emboldened by his apparent success, had begun dipping into outright fraud. He'd created fake investment opportunities, using Chloe's name and credit to secure loans, then funneling the money to offshore accounts. He'd even begun selling shares in Willowbrook's future development to gullible investors, complete with forged documents bearing Chloe's signature. We let him. We monitored every transaction, documented every fraud, recorded every conversation. We even allowed him to believe he'd successfully pressured Chloe into signing the partnership agreement, though the document she actually signed was a cleverly crafted duplicate that committed her to nothing while appearing to give him everything. The final piece fell into place when Isabel, the mistress, realizing Marcus had no intention of leaving Chloe, agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity and a modest financial settlement. She provided emails, text messages, and even a video recording of Marcus explaining his entire plan to her, complete with a whiteboard diagram of how he would extract maximum value from the marriage. We had everything. A mountain of evidence so high, so detailed, that even the most expensive lawyer couldn't climb over it. The confrontation happened on a crisp October morning, exactly 18 months after the wedding. Marcus had scheduled a meeting with what he thought was a group of international investors interested in developing Willowbrook into a luxury resort. In reality, they were undercover officers from the Financial Crimes Unit. Julian, Charles, and I watched from an adjacent room via video feed as Marcus laid out his plans with slick confidence. He presented forged documents, fake environmental impact reports, even a scale model of the proposed resort. He promised returns of 300% within 5 years. When he finished his presentation, the lead investor, a detective named Vargas, smiled and said, "It's very impressive, Mr. Clayton, but we have a few questions about the ownership documents." "Of course," Marcus said, not sensing the danger. "My wife is the sole heir. She's signed over development rights to our partnership. These signatures here," Vargas said, pointing to the documents. "They appear to be notarized by an Arthur Finch. Is that correct?" Marcus paled slightly. "Yes, he's our financial planner." "Interesting, because Arthur Finch lost his notary license in 2017 for fraud. And according to these records, Vargas slid another document across the table. He's currently cooperating with authorities in an investigation into inheritance scams." The room went very still. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus said, but his confidence was cracking. "That's not all," Vargas continued. "We've been reviewing your financials. These transfers to the Cayman Islands, these loans taken against property you don't own, these investors you've promised returns to—" "It's quite the operation." Marcus stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "This meeting is over." "I'm afraid not," Vargas said, and at that moment, uniformed officers entered the room. "Marcus Clayton, you're under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, forgery, and attempted grand larceny. You have the right to remain silent." I didn't watch the rest. I didn't need to. The expression on his face, the shock, the fury, the sudden realization that he'd been outplayed was everything I'd hoped for and less satisfying than I'd imagined. Telling Chloe was the hardest thing I've ever done. I brought her to Willowbrook, to the library where she'd spent rainy afternoons as a child reading, books from floor to ceiling shelves. I began at the beginning, the conversation I'd overheard at the wedding. Her initial reaction was disbelief, then anger at me. "You've been spying on my husband? How could you?" Then I showed her the evidence. Not all of it, that would have been too cruel, but enough. The timeline Marcus had written for himself. The emails with Arthur Finch, the financial, records showing he'd been using her, credit for his schemes. The color drained from her face as she read. When she reached the part about Isabel, the mistress, the video, the plans to disappear together once Willowbrook was liquidated, she made a small, broken sound and covered her face with her hands. I let her cry, my own eyes burning. When the storm had passed, she looked at me with eyes that had aged a decade in an hour. "All this time?" she whispered. "The entire marriage?" "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." She shook her head, not in denial but in bewilderment. "The things he said, the plans we made, was any of it real?" "He was playing a part," I said gently, "and he was very good at it." The legal proceedings that followed were swift and brutal. With the evidence we'd compiled, Marcus faced 27 federal charges. His lawyer advised him to plead guilty to avoid an even longer sentence. He received 12 years in a medium security prison, with eligibility for parole in 8. Patricia Clayton, confronted with her role in the conspiracy, suffered another breakdown and was committed to a psychiatric facility. The Clayton family, what remained of it, disappeared from society pages, their name now associated with scandal rather than prestige. Chloe filed for divorce, citing fraud and cruel treatment. The settlement was straightforward since Marcus had signed a prenuptial agreement that protected her separate property. He got nothing from Willowbrook, nothing from her trust, nothing but the clothes on his back and the debt he'd accumulated. The aftermath was difficult. Chloe moved back to Willowbrook, a shadow of her former self. Some days she didn't get out of bed. Some days she raged at the world, at Marcus, at me for not telling her sooner. The betrayal had fractured something in her, and I knew it would take years to heal, if it ever did completely. But slowly, with time and therapy, she began to rebuild. She went back to school for landscape architecture, combining her love of Willowbrook with a new purpose. She tore up Marcus's development plans, and instead created a conservation easement that would protect the estate in perpetuity. One evening, about 2 years after the arrest, we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The vineyard was thriving, the house was filled with light again, and Chloe had just received her certification. "Thank you, Dad," she said quietly, not looking at me. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. Even when I was giving up on myself." She turned to me, her eyes clear for the first time in years. "I kept thinking about what would have happened if you just let it go. I would have lost everything. Not just Willowbrook, myself." I took her hand, the same hand I'd placed in Marcus's at the altar what felt like a lifetime ago. "A father's job is to protect his child," I said. "Even from things she can't see coming." "He was so convincing," she said, a ghost of the old pain in her voice. "The best cons are," I said. "They tell you exactly what you want to hear." She was silent for a long time. "Then do you think he ever, even for a moment, cared about me? Or was it always just the money?" I considered lying to spare her, but she deserved the truth, no matter how harsh. "I think he cared about what you represented," I said carefully. "Restoration, redemption, but not you, sweetheart. Not the wonderful, smart, kind woman you are." That was invisible to him. To my surprise, she smiled, a small, sad, but genuine smile. "Good, that makes it easier." And in a way it did. Knowing it was all a transaction, a business deal, made the personal betrayal slightly less personal. He hadn't rejected her. He'd never known her to begin with. Last month, Chloe married again. His name is David, and he's a history professor who gets excited about soil composition and migratory bird patterns. He proposed during a hike on Willowbrook's property, with a simple band he'd saved for 6 months to buy. He asked for my blessing, not my permission. The wedding was small, just family and close friends in Willowbrook's garden. Chloe wore a simple white dress, and when she came down the aisle on my arm, she wasn't a fairy tale princess, but a real woman, scarred but strong, cautious but hopeful. As I placed her hand in David's, I said the same words I'd said to Marcus. "I'm trusting you with my greatest treasure." But this time, David looked at Chloe, really looked at her, and said, "She's not a treasure to be owned. She's a person to be loved. And I do love her more than I can say, And I knew, watching his earnest expression, hearing the tremor of emotion in his voice, that this was different. This was real. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and champagne flowed, Chloe found me watching from the edge of the garden. "Happy?" she asked, slipping her arm through mine. "More than you can imagine," I said, kissing her forehead. "He's a good man." "He is," she agreed. Then, after a moment, "In a weird way, I'm almost grateful to Marcus." I raised an eyebrow. "Grateful?" "He taught me what to look for," she said. "Not just in a partner, but in myself." I was so eager to be loved that I forgot to ask if I was being seen. Now I know the difference. Wisdom bought at a terrible price, but wisdom nonetheless. As the party continued into the night, I slipped away to the study where this whole journey had truly begun. From my desk drawer, I took out the USB drive containing all the evidence against Marcus. I held it in my palm, this tiny piece of plastic that held so much pain and deception. Then I walked to the fireplace and threw it into the flames. It melted quickly, the plastic curling and blackening, the data disappearing into smoke and ash. Some burdens aren't meant to be carried forever. Some stories need to end so new ones can begin. The door opened and David stood there holding 2 glasses of scotch. "Chloe sent me to find you. She says you're brooding." "Just remembering," I said, accepting the glass. He joined me at the fireplace, watching the last of the plastic dissolve. "She told me everything, What you did, what you went through to protect her." I took a sip, the scotch smooth and smoky. "She's my daughter." "I know," he said quietly. "And I want you to know, I'll spend every day making sure she never doubts why I'm with her." "Not for this," he gestured at the room, the house, the estate beyond. "For her?" I looked at this good, solid man who loved books more than balance sheets, who saw my daughter's heart instead of her net worth. "That's all I've ever wanted for her," I said. "To be loved for who she is." We clinked glasses, the sound echoing in the quiet room. Outside, laughter drifted from the garden. Chloe's laughter, light and unburdened, the sound I'd feared I'd never hear again. The story that began with whispered cruelties in a hotel hallway ended here, in the home we'd fought to protect, with a new beginning unfolding just outside the window. The revenge I'd planned had been exacted not through violence or shouting, but through patience, evidence, and the relentless protection of what matters most. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's preservation. It's watching your child heal, grow, and find real love after being shown only its counterfeit. It's knowing you did everything you could, even when it was hard, even when it hurt, even when you had to wait. The fire crackled, consuming the last physical remnant of the darkness. Outside, under a sky full of stars, my daughter danced with her husband, surrounded by people who loved her in a home that was safe, on land that would remain in our family for generations to come. And that was worth every difficult moment. If this story of protection, patience, and ultimate justice resonated with you, please show your support. Hit the like button. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories about family, betrayal, and redemption, and share this with someone who needs to hear that even the most perfect-seeming situations can hide dangerous truths. Most importantly, comment below with your thoughts. Have you ever had to protect a loved one from someone they trusted? What would you have done in my situation? Your stories and insights create our community. Thank you for watching. And remember, the truth always finds its way to the light, especially when good people refuse to stop looking for it.